don't like people who are telling the truth, speaking out fearlessly. I wonder why not. Maybe
Well,
they're afraid that their lies will dissolve and collapse and turn into toxic powder. You think?
I have a suspicion, Dr. Rima. Well, it says we're back on the YouTube live stream right now. So that's
Okay.
good. Folks on YouTube, you've missed a minute or so of the discussion. We have been talking
But it
about the.
was the best.
Yes, we've been talking about the resolution of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. The Parliamentary Assembly is, as I think I understand it, actually members of the various parliaments of the various nations coming together almost like a European United Nations where the local representatives come together and they oversee the Council of Europe, which is not NATO and not the EU. And that organization oversees the European Court of Human Rights. And so that's really the connection there. This is a human rights organization that has legal legitimacy. It's part of the governmental structure of 40 something nations, and they've said very clearly that informed consent must be respected when it comes to the COVID vaccination. So, a very important development, and we are posting that as quickly as we can on Open Source Truth. I just have to do that right here. So,
Jeff Bezos is stepping down as the CEO at and will
interesting.
take the position of executive chair to allow impossibly bad working conditions to exist for vast numbers of people. But it's convenient. You just go on and you go click, 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 and this evening it's or tomorrow morning it's at your door. And isn't that nice? And we don't have to think about to morality. We don't have to think about any of that because click, 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 and I've got it. Choose not to do that. Or we choose a different way of being in the world with every single purchase, with every single click.
And that's exactly what the founder of Minds was saying, that we have to do that. And that leads us back to the great social media boycott of 2021. One of the most
Yes,
recent
it does.
articles on Open Source Truth talks about that and about the steps you can take. And there will be more articles. We'll be talking about how you actually join telegram.org, how you join minds.com. We're looking for other places to put videos because we frankly do not expect our ability to live stream these things on YouTube to last much longer.
Correct.
And that's that's where we are at the present.
Would it's an excellent article, Ralph. Would you please go to Open Source Truth and discuss the article on the great social media exodus in detail?
Yes, I will do that. Let me just have to go to open. Um, I noticed, by the way, that nobody is on the live stream right now. So maybe that's really been cut off in a different way. And even though it says it's on, it's not. We are on at People for People. That's FOR. Peopleforpeople.ning.com. Go to peopleforpeople.com and sign up. You'll get notifications when our program starts, and also notifications when other programs on the People for People network go on. And I think you'll find a lot of it very helpful and very useful. Great programming, great people. All right, here we are, the great global social media boycott. And if it opens up, the image is appropriate. All right. So it was the great global social media boycott being done by our side. There were three social media purges done to us by them. That's 2018, 2020, and 2021. We began talking about that earlier in the program, and it starts. The article starts with first they came for the neo Nazis and nobody complained. Then they came for the Alex Joneses and a few people complained. Then just before the 2020 election in October, they came for me and thousands of other independent voices on the social media, and people were too busy to complain. And then the election fraud of 2020 was engineered, and they started coming after Trump and anyone who questioned the deep state narrative that the election wasn't stolen by someone. Some people complained. Those complainers were banned too. Some have even been arrested. One blogger was just arrested for a satirical meme posted in 2016. He was in his mid-20s at the time. He posted a meme that said, you can vote by text. It was obviously satirical. And the text number that was given actually links people to Hillary Clinton's campaign, but it said you can vote for Hillary by text. And the U.S. government has issued an indictment against this young blogger. And that indictment, when you read the operative paragraph of the indictment, talks only about assembly and speech. What he did, he and other people, was to communicate with each other and develop memes and distribute them on the internet, which were intended to have an effect on the election. Well, wait a minute. I thought as citizens we're all allowed to have an effect on the election. But this effect was apparently unlawful in some way because it was going to take people who thought they could vote by texting a message and they wouldn't go to the polls and vote. So apparently that was interfering in the election, even though the text message, if anyone actually did it, went directly to Hillary Clinton's own campaign. So who was being harmed? Nonetheless, we have an indictment. The young man has been taken prisoner by the U.S. government in Florida, and he's being taken up to New York State where he's been indicted. Was he ever in New York State? Probably not. He's a Floridian, and he's not traveling around the country, and certainly he's not broadcasting his blog from New York. Nonetheless, despite the Sixth Amendment, which if you ever read basically suggests that you can't try people for crimes outside of the districts where the crimes occurred, that was meant to protect people from being taken from their home states and moved across state lines and charged for federal crimes. Nonetheless, it's exactly what's going on. Another little piece of the Constitution that's being ignored. So I point that out only in passing. So the great social media purge banned nearly all the dissident voices. Even retired Congressperson Ron Paul was banned. Apparently he said things about COVID that were unacceptable. And if anyone's going to be, if you're going to be banning Dr. Ron Paul, I think you've proven the point that there is no freedom of speech left. We all watched in disbelief as the Supreme Court failed to actually follow its own precedents on the election issue. In 2018, Chief Justice Roberts wrote a decision in Abbott versus Perez. Case arises from redistricting. Perez sues Governor Abbott in the state of Texas, saying you redrew the electoral districts in a way that'll prevent Hispanic Texans from getting one more seat in Congress. The matter was heard by federal trial court and federal appeals courts, and both courts dismissed the case without evidence. They did not allow any evidence to be heard. They just dismissed the cases. Supreme Court heard the appeal, and Chief Justice Roberts said, when you're dealing with electoral fraud, federal courts are authorized to take judicial notice of statistical voting evidence that's part of the public record. It doesn't have to be brought before the trial court below or the appeals court. The Supreme Court itself can even take a look at that evidence. And looking at that evidence in this case, we can say statistically that there was no demonization of the Hispanic Texan vote. And so the Texans of Hispanic background did not lose a seat in Congress, and they didn't. And therefore, there was no electoral fraud. Well, of course, what happened in the 2020 election is the opposite. The Supreme Court itself refused to look at it. Would it have had to determine that there was fraud? In the standard is that the statistical evidence alone is sufficient to show fraud or lack of fraud, and you don't have to know who committed the fraud or how the fraud was committed. In case just 2 years ago. So I find the developments that have happened in the past month or so to be very perplexing. Institutions that one would think would be paying more attention to their own precedents chose not to. So here we are. We now know that there is no freedom of speech left. There is no redress in front of the courts. In fact, thousands and thousands of Americans were so distraught by what was happening that they went to Congress